Hey friends, today we're going to talk about the dreaded ketones. And specifically, we're going to talk a little bit about the keto diet versus the low carb diet, because the very first question I always get from everyone who wants to join is, do I teach the keto diet? The truth is, most of the people who ask this, in that tone that says, I already know what you're dishing out. They actually have no idea what that really means, no idea what they're really asking. Because as soon as I say, no, I teach the ketogenic diet, they look at me like I have two heads, right? So I know they really have not really any idea what the keto diet is or what the ketogenic diet is. So today, that's what we're going to discuss and really try to clarify what it is that you learn when you become my client and why my clients are successful, right? Okay. So the diet I teach is properly called the ketogenic diet. Keto, which is short for ketones. So literally, ketogenic means ketone creating. So I teach people to eat in a way that creates ketones. All right, so right away, I know I'm losing you, right? I'm losing. People do not respond well to the term keto or ketones. Has a very negative connotation these days. And I know it kind of just makes people cringe right from the start. So, people don't want to be associated with some fad diet, this crazy bacon butter eating diet, like that's not going to work, or I don't have time. I love when people say that. I don't have time, as if they don't take the time to eat every day, because that's all the time it takes, right? This reaction, I don't take it personally. It's not very keto specific. It's a reaction I see all the time as a doctor. So it's, the reaction I get when I ask people to cut down on alcohol and they're addicted, or when I ask people to cut down on cigarettes and they're addicted. This is the reaction that comes from not wanting to address bad habits. So switching to a ketogenic diet is definitely addressing a bad habit. And we're going to talk about that habit ahead. The term ketone is a scientific term, right? It has nothing to do with a fad diet. It's not a fad term. It's not a new term at all. The term ketone was first used by a chemist in the 1840s when he discovered it in the urine of diabetics and named it. A ketone is simply a breakdown product of your fat. Let me say that again. Ketones are a breakdown product of your fat. That means if you have a lot of extra fat on your body, you should be interested in any diet that leads to the creation of ketones, because that means that diet is what's going to break down your fat. I repeat, if you want to erase fat, you need to learn to create ketones. So why does it seem like this keto talk came out of nowhere? Like all of a sudden we're suddenly talking about it? It's simply because there's been an explosion of new research that has improved our understanding of how our diet is actually directly linked to our health. People underestimate this very greatly. If I told you I could feed you in a way today that will make you feel great tomorrow, you would immediately doubt that. And yet there's nothing that is more true. So why this explosion of nutrition science in the last 20, even the last 10 years? One would have thought that all this nutrition science stuff would have preceded the recommendations of the 1970s, right? When the food pyramid was created. But sadly, no. That food pyramid diet and all the addiction and the awful habits that it created came first. That's a shocker, right? The food pyramid was not based on hard science. It was based on observations of what healthy people were doing around the world. That means the food pyramid helps healthy people stay healthy, and that's all. It is not designed to help sick or overweight people reverse their condition. It's only in about the last 10 years that we've been actually able to identify the blood markers associated with metabolic health. And we're now able to test directly through your blood the effect of whatever diet you choose. I think all of us get the sense that this has been around forever. Like we've been measuring cholesterol since the 1900s. We only just discovered HDL, the good cholesterol, in the 1980s. And it only became a regular thing to measure it in the 1990s. This is long after we cut out all of the fat in our diets, including the healthy fat in the 1980s, and then realized half of that fat was the good stuff that we really actually needed. Eating a decent amount of healthy fat is really particularly important for a few reasons. Healthy fats support our immunity for fighting things like cancer. It supports our brain for prevention of neurodegenerative diseases like dementia. And it supports our hormone health, which helps us maintain a healthy weight easily and maintain our fertility. It's not a wonder that we're seeing major problems with all of these things since the government food pyramid decided it was a good idea to cut out healthy fat. It's always interesting to look at photos before the 1970s and after the 1970s. This is before the food pyramid started making all the government recommendations about what we should eat. And then the results of that intervention 50 years later, right? Look at the beach scene on the left and you see fairly fit people who weren't even really trying. And then the beach scene on the right is people who would really like to improve their health, but are getting fed all the wrong information. A packed beach these days doesn't require that many people. 1 in every 3 adults in the US is overweight. And of those overweight people, a very significant amount are obese, which means their weight is actually causing health problems. So what we know now, based on the science, is that ketogenic diets have the ability to clean up this mess that we created in the 1980s and actually reverse all the effects of metabolic disease. And we know that because we can measure it. That's what has changed now. So I teach this all the time, right? This is my favorite thing to teach about is, our human bodies are amazing. It has always been essential to our survival that our weight could go up and go back down. We eat and we create fat storage. And when we don't eat, what happens? Our bodies are able to use the fat storage. Our bodies are able to create ketones. Okay. That same science has shown us what exactly is in our diet that creates the fat to begin with. So what makes us so fat and unhappy? And I don't mean to simply imply that we're unhappy because we're fat. No, the same food that makes us fat also makes us unhappy. And that is also scientifically proven. This photo really says it all, folks, right? While the carnivore folks and the plant folks duke it out over which is healthier, should we be super strong or should we be super emaciated to be more healthy, the vast majority of Americans are eating the fat cat diet, right? And this isn't a knock against carnivores or vegans. They are both doing better than the fat cat. Everyone would agree on that. But there's definitely a more middle of the road approach, and that's the one that I take. So if you're a carnivore, can you train with me? Certainly. If you're a vegan, can you train with me? Certainly. But I'm going to recommend to most people that you get a good mix of both animal and plant products in your diet. There's more to this photo, right? I mean, us sad cats know that we should be eating a healthier diet, but most of us don't. So why is that? That's the big question, the why. And we already know the answer. The fat cat's diet is addictive. I don't mean addictive in the cute way that we think of puppies as being addictive. I mean the standard American diet, the so-called SAD diet, is made up of hyper-processed food that is scientifically made to be addictive. Those things on the middle shelves at the grocery store aisle are created to have maximal addictive quality to keep you coming back. So it's not your fault that you can't say no to the SAD diet. The SAD diet contains the one ingredient that has been shown to be more addictive than cocaine. And do you know what that is? Surprise, it's sugar. So now we know that it's not just unhealthy fat that creates fat, it's mostly sugar and things laced with sugar. This extra sugar creates a lot of extra fat burden and many, many other health problems. So when we got rid of the fat in the 1980s and replaced it all with sugar in our products, we created a road rage situation where all of us are racing towards unhealthy outcomes. And none of us are able to easily throw it in reverse. And thanks to food manufacturers understanding that and using it to their own advantage, now we have sugar everywhere, in all the places you would expect, and also the places you don't expect. Often they are hiding the sugar from you and using chemical names so you don't recognize it. Fast food is so addictive that we don't even bother to hide it there, right? We're all aware of how much sugar is there, and there's so much of it that we can't even put it down. But also take a look at what shows up when you look at the world through the lens of sugar, right? You see a lot of fruits and vegetables there. And yeah, you can ask any diabetic, what's the first thing that they're told to eat when they're diagnosed with diabetes? They're told to start eating lots of fruits and vegetables. And you can see why that probably isn't a good idea. Diabetics, find me. And don't let anyone tell you that you need to be on medicine for the rest of your life. Okay, so the first principle I teach to anyone who wants to be healthier, including my diabetics, and to anyone who wants to lose weight, you need to cut out sugar. So we learn about the low carb diet. So take a look here and take a look at the difference between the low carb diet and the low sugar diet. You see the difference? Right. There is none. Most people recognize that cutting out sugar is probably a good thing, and most people accept that as something they probably should do. But people tend to shy away from the term low carb. They associate that with some sort of fad or some sort of cult. So very often you'll hear me say that I teach a low sugar approach. And this is just so I scare less people away. But low sugar and low carb mean the same thing. So what happens when you lower the sugar in your diet? Lowering the sugar leads to less eating by habit due to addiction. You may hear opponents of a low carb diet insist that carbs are essential. And they're right, carbs are essential. Our bodies and our brains especially need sugar. They need a very specific sugar in the form of glucose to function. So that's absolutely right. Our bodies do need sugar. But here's the best kept secret of all. Glucose is so important to our bodies, so important to our brains, that the human body can actually make it when we don't eat it. This is a process called gluconeogenesis. And in order for your body to make that important sugar, in order for it to make glucose, we simply need to reverse engineer all the sugar we have eaten and start to break down our fat. In other words, we need to create ketones. Yes, ketones. No longer a dirty word, right? We should all want to run on ketones, unless you're saving up your extra fat for some other purpose. Are you saving up your fat? I'm not. Okay, so what's the advantage of running on ketones? This is why my clients are so happy, right? It's bye-bye to the pain, the sadness, the overweight. We all joke with one another, right? That everyone thinks that we live this lifestyle for the vanity, but oh my God, it's so far beyond that. Before we even start experiencing the weight loss, our pain starts to evaporate, whether it's headaches or indigestion or joint pain. We just start to feel so much happier, so much more motivated. The brain fog starts to lift and we start to realize, oh my God, all that exhaustion I have been feeling has just been a continuous carb coma. And when you cut all the carbs, it's like somebody has just suddenly turned the lights on. And then I get to say to them, I'm glad you're feeling so great. I'm glad you're happier on the scale. I'm glad your clothes are fitting better. But also, can I share with you that you just significantly cut the risk of heart disease, cancer, and dementia in your future? And that's like the wow moment. When my clients look back at me and say, why don't we teach this? And why didn't I learn this 20 years ago? And I need everyone in my life to know this. Okay, the why is this research is really new. We didn't know this stuff in the 1980s. We didn't know this stuff in 2010. This is why you need to start opening your ears now. We are teaching it. I am not the only proponent of a low-carb diet out there. There are doctors that I'm connected to worldwide who are trying to preach this, but we are not as loud as food manufacturers, as governments that promote food manufacturers, and certainly not as loud as the big pharma companies out there. And trust me, I had that eureka moment as well, and that's why I'm here teaching you today. I did promise at the start of this that I would show you the difference between a low-carb diet and a keto diet versus a traditional diet. And really that all has to do with the percent of fat versus carbs versus protein that you eat. So that's all your macronutrients. So I think this graph sums it up pretty well, right? So in a traditional diet, which is the traditional food pyramid, about 50% of everything you eat would be carbs. And a ketogenic diet is on the other side of the spectrum, which is basically the opposite. It's a very high fat diet with at least 70% of everything you eat coming from fat. A low carb diet can be described as anything in the middle of these two things. When I start with my clients, we go very close to the ketogenic diet at first, and that's simply because it has the ability to fix your metabolism really fast. And it's a very brain healthy diet. In fact, we prescribe it for people with uncontrolled seizures because of its calming effect on the brain. And we also prescribe it for people with uncontrolled diabetes who need to get their metabolism fixed ASAP. So keto is kind of strict and it's very difficult to maintain that for the long term. But if you have very significant disease that's controlled with the keto diet, it's certainly safe for the long term. I don't prescribe a ketogenic diet for most people because it's simply not necessary for most people. Most people don't have to be that strict in order to improve their health and maintain a healthy weight. Okay, guys, I hope I taught you a little something today. Thanks for watching. If you feel like you learned something about ketones, about weight loss, about the keto diet versus a low carb diet, please hit subscribe below. If you'd like to work with me, you can check out my website at emergencyhealthfix.com. You'll find me and Emergency Health Fix on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and check out my other YouTube videos here. If you have any comments or questions about what I shared today, just comment below. But please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Bye, friends. See you next time. Stay healthy.